Expecting a good turnout tonight
Hope so. We had like close to 50. I was counting last week and it was 46. And then I
for
got
the
into my presentation and there was a few odds and ends, so probably around 50.
for the Broken Skull.
The Broken
Yeah,
Skull,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And maybe that had a bigger draw because of the name and nobody knows what it is. Who knows? We'll see.
Well, it was interesting because my son was here, and
Okay.
so he was able to sit in on this, and he paddled the Nahanni with me in 1998.
Okay.
I guess so. Not the Broken Skull.
Yeah.
We came from the Moose Ponds
Oh, did
instead.
you? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually done that route twice.
Okay. The
Did it
Moose
the
Ponds you can get access by road, I think, eh?
Well, yeah, yes, but access is. I mean, you don't actually drive right into the moose ponds
Yeah.
by any means, but you can get a good part of the way in by going, a way up. And I guess it's the Yukon Highway that you
Yeah.
go up, and
Yeah,
you
and then
can.
paddle over some headwaters and through the moose ponds, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And
there was a guy in the Yukon I was talking to a few years ago. Eva was going to do a trip with him, I think, and they were going to go up some river, across the moose ponds, and down the Nahanni. I think that was the plan.
I've forgotten the name of the river, but I think I know the access route that you're referring to.
Hmm.
It's been an awful long time since I've been there, so
Um,
interesting, a difference in technique. We uh, we went first. I was paddling with Glenn Spence, who I think is still a member of the WCA.
okay.
Uh, and we were paddling in 17-foot Grumman whitewater.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that we lined, this is back in
Oh,
1980,
okay.
and I think that we lined about three rapids and portaged a couple of others. And it took us a week to get down through the Moose Ponds, about 70K, I think,
Yeah.
down to the end of the Moose Ponds. And in 1998, we were in Royalex boats with 9 years more whitewater experience.
Yeah.
And we went through in 3 days and ran everything.
Yeah. 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 It was a whole different world in 1980 for sure,
Yeah.
but very interesting.
Yeah, you referred to the cabin where all the names were up. I don't know if it's still there, but one of the names that I remember seeing was Pierre Trudeau,
Oh, really? Okay.
who would have done it in the, I think, probably early 1970s,
Yeah.
before it was a park anyway.
Yeah.
And he was um, quite instrumental in it becoming a park.
I read that in some publication somewhere that, he went through and did he go through with Bill Mason? I think he did, eh?
I'm not sure if he did on the Nahanni,
Okay.
but
Um,
he certainly paddled with Bill Mason on other
yeah.
rivers. Like I think he paddled with him on
Right.
the Hood.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, he's one of the claim to fame is my daughter goes to used to go to Wapameo and Canoe Lake, and the boys camp is Ahmed. He went there
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
in the 20s or something, or I don't know, 30s or something. I don't know. But that's yeah, he's big into it, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, very much
Or
so.
was.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. So let me know if it's too loud and I'll adjust accordingly or not loud enough. Is that okay volume wise?
Seems okay.
Okay. So this is a video we made and we posted on YouTube. So the first couple of scenes are just to get your attention.
Thank you to the spirits of the broken skull.
And this video is like a part 2 from the Broken Skull video. So people that were on the last call last week presentation, we did the Broken Skull. So this one starts off with the compliments of the Nahanni.
So this one started off with
Turn up the volume here a bit. So the South Nahanni is quite a wide river. It's almost like a moving lake. There's not a lot of rapids, but it's moving along. And you can see the watercolor is siltier.
you can see our color is still
Turn the camera on.
Some wildlife.
This one was a bear to me. No, it's a bear. Water down.
We didn't see too much wildlife. A couple bears, a couple caribou, a moose, or 2 moose, maybe 3 moose. We did see some wolves, 5 wolves.
Megabug.
All right, so this is like a day or 2 down the river, and we're going to Rabbit Kettle. So we're going up a little creek, and unfortunately, the minute you get off the main river, there's like lots of bugs.
Well, not too bad now. The bugs are down. Little breeze. Breathable.
We're paddling this inland lake, the Rabbit Kettle. It's a ranger station. It happened that we had some forecast weather that nobody could fly in or out of the Rabbit Kettle. So the actual ranger was supposed to be there, wasn't there. This is our typical chow line for supper.
Recording in progress.
It was a guided trip, so all the food was prepped by the guides. We just had to line up and eat it. I think somebody's got, Mike, can you mute everybody? Because there's some feedback coming on somebody's mic. There's a way to do that somehow. We went for a nice little hike here. This is like a caribou horn, I guess. And the guide was just talking about, you know, the mice eat the horns, basically. They chew on the calcium, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute. Beautiful lake, you know, warm water. We swam.
Gary,
maybe
were
10,
they
15
allowing
minutes.
people to go into the Tufa Mounds?
Beautiful. Oh, something's coming in. Clear the deck. Make room for more stuff.
This is the tough part of the trip. Where you're
Gee.
constantly being fed.
Sorry to answer that question. Somebody asked about could we go into the Tufa Mounds? Normally you can if there's a ranger, a park ranger there, because they couldn't get in or out of the lake because of weather. We were there by ourselves, so we could not go over. There's a crossing, a creek crossing, that you hop on a small boat that they pull you back and forth across, and that was locked out. So we saw it from, I don't know, a kilometer away, I guess, that picture Gary showed there.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't the best, but you got to follow the rules. So this is about, I think 2 days later, we're exiting the lake. And then again, there's mega bugs, but at least we're going downriver and it's not raining or anything. And it's quite a steep bank here from the pond down, maybe 3, 4, 5 feet. And I don't think too many people use this route. Hence the trail's very small. Most people stop on the river and portage in maybe a half a K. This portage is only like, 5 meters. It's kind of more of a drag over and then back into the creek. So it is a nice sneaky way to get into Rabbit Kettle Lake.
3, 2, 1, 2, 1. I got the rope.
You can see everybody in the bug jackets because it's mega bugs. Oh, there's a good view of the bank. It's maybe 4 feet drop into the creek. And then on the way in, we had a beaver dam and it was less water. So now it's flowing. We just flowed right over it. We were going upriver coming in, of course. So we had to step on the beaver dam and, haul the boat over.
Now it's muddy.
Oh, that was the other thing. Yeah, the creek was clear when we came in. So this is an indication of some storm up in the mountains that, had some erosion, I guess.
Gonna have fun on this.
So this is the official portage. And you sign in, you could pull your boats up and then walk your gear over to Rabbit Kettle.
That he would base himself in. But most of his time would be spent up here on the river. And he'd have a 20-foot long scow boat, like a square nosed boat with a transom at the back, and have a small little motor, putt motor. And he would make his way up through the rapids, up through the canyons, get to the portage, get to the Community Falls, take apart his boat, carry it up plank by plank, carry up the engine, and then put it all back together above the falls, and then come motoring up here to his cabin. And he would hunt, he would prospect, he would just kind of hang out in the woods here doing his thing. And then the film made. Yeah. I think 1967. That's right. Story.
What was that?
There's a national film of Albert Faley. They never found the whole thing. Nope, not many people did. It's a really good film. It's about 30 minutes long. National Film Board of Canada.
Yeah, it's about 30 minutes long. It's quite a nice film, and it shows the boat that he traveled in. I love the name of some of these creeks. Hell Roaring Creek. So this is your typical feeder in creek, super clear water, cold. And basically you could camp anywhere. I mean, there's every corner, there's a gravel bar like this you can camp on just about, or every K. So, if you run into another group, it's not an issue. A K down the river, there's a camp just like this. Generally.
9 all day and drizzly. Now it's kind of cleared up with that. Like 3 was great. Keeps the bugs away. 0 bugs right now.
Yeah. So we just came from mega bugs, and here there's nothing.
Tops and peaks. Looked like it was gonna clear.
Beautiful landscape. Little overcast today, but every day we had a pretty good day, I'd say. Didn't really get much rain at all. I don't know, Brian, do you remember much rain? I don't remember anything really.
Very, very little. I remember this day though. This was probably the coolest day just because it was cloudy. Yeah. And then the sun would come out and it'd be cloudy again. So you're putting on and off layers, but it was a bit cooler this one day.
Yeah, most of us had dry suits on. Yuri here is just wearing like a splash jacket and I don't know, maybe
We have the technology.
maybe a wetsuit. I'm not sure, but it wasn't too bad temperature wise.
Mike, you never look so good.
So we attempted to sail here. We had all the boats lined up, like 7 boats in a row. Or yeah, 7 boats. I think it was 7. Yeah. And we got the big, 8x10 fly out and attempted to sail. Lasted maybe 15 minutes and the wind died.
Yeah. It took us longer to set up the sail than we actually sailed.
Yeah.
What were the name of these mountains?
Sunblood. So this is our wildlife sighting, and I had to zoom in on this shot, but Larry Durst has some excellent still shots. So what we had is a moose, mama moose, I guess, and 5 wolves, and it's hard to make out there, but they were not far away, like maybe, I don't know, 50 meters. But I'm kind of zooming on my GoPro here, so it's not the best.
That moose, I don't know what it's doing there with the wolves there.
Yeah, the wolves are chasing the moose. So the moose is sitting on the edge of the water. So we don't really want to talk about what would happen in the next 15 minutes or so. I mean, to me, if I was a moose, I'd head across the river. But there are strong swimmers, the moose, and we saw a few moose swimming in the river. And the water is cold, so maybe the wolves wouldn't like that. But he seems to be in the water now, or she's in the water. So maybe that's the out. Okay, so what we did here is we went into like a dead end part of the river and did our camp. Okay, so I'm moving quickly ahead. This is the ranger station at the top of Virginia Falls. So it's civilized here. There's boardwalks and platforms. And there were a few rangers there and they were waiting for their flight to get out. Like I said, the last couple of days, flights couldn't come in and out of these areas because it's overcast. Although the weather seemed to be okay, but it was just overcast, and I guess there was flights.
Yeah, it was back in Fort Simpson. They were weathered out. They couldn't take off, but it was actually pretty good where we were.
Okay. So this is the top of Virginia Falls. We're going down the boardwalk. It's quite civilized getting to the, lookout. It's maybe a 10-minute walk or so. Maybe a kilometer. We got a plaque there. We got danger signs. Those waves are like big as a house. They're like about 2 or 3 or 4 canoe high. It's hard to see the perspective. In the next view, you'll see the drop, basically. Yeah, this was the falls was named after one of the early explorers through the area. Named it after his daughter. In the Denny, they call it Nakchikcho, big water falling. This is a classic view of the falls. 96-meter total drop. And put in perspective, Niagara Falls is 51 meters.
Yeah.
So it's almost double the height of Niagara Falls.
Just stare at the camera.
We're going for a group shot here.
High definition.
Some of the people on the trip had this book called The Dangerous River by Raymond Patterson. And he was one of the early explorers of the area. So people were reading the book as we were marching down the river. And it was good because you could read the kind of version with Patterson, and then actually experience a Deadman's Valley or whatever as you travel through.
Oh, it's not. No. Any problem with that sentence?
How much do we have?
So always setting up a photograph is interesting, just watching the dynamics of people. But we had a good group. Brian will agree, I'm sure.
Yep.
Carnivorous plants. So they have really super sticky stuff on the end of those little tentacle things. And the bug.
One of the advantages of a guide is they know a lot of stuff, nature, rocks, history. So that's one of the benefits of having somebody that's knowledgeable about certain things.
Of the door, these little red flowers.
Yeah. So they supposedly catch bugs, which is a good thing. This was hiking up blood, what's it called? Blood Vein Mountain?
Sunblood.
Sunblood, sorry. So this trail's going up about, like, I don't know, 30 degrees on a diagonal. Now, this was summer, and actually some of us were just coming off COVID. There's a couple of us got COVID on this trip. No big issues, except I was one of them. And, I was definitely feeling winded on this day. I was coming off maybe 2 days before, 3 days before was the peak. And I only had 2 days of real, feeling not so good. But really, it was, in my circumstance, really nothing. It was just I felt not, perfect. So the skies have opened up, and all of a sudden there's mega planes coming in. So that day we had, I think, 4 or 5 planes come in, maybe 5 or 6, I don't know, a lot. So we ended up shuttling some of the gear down the day before, and this day was the final day. So we had like basically 2 days to get most of the gear down. And it's about maybe a 2 kilometer portage, 1.5 kilometers, maybe something like that. But you got to do it kind of 2 or 3 times to get all the gear down. There's the famous Virginia Falls in the background.
That's a good job.
Okay, V.
So down the bottom, it's very misty because of the falls, and it's kind of cool. So we started with the Broken Skull, and 2 of our members were only going to do the Broken Skull to this Virginia Falls. So they headed out on the plane. That plane was actually delayed by a day, and that was our food in plane for the next, say, 10 days. And those 2 guys were going to leave, which is Neil and who left? I can't remember now.
Me.
Brian.
Brian.
Brian, there you go. You left. So this is called the 4th Canyon, which is the first canyon you go through. And it's motoring along about 10K an hour. It's supposedly class 2-3 here.
Look at the canyon up ahead.
Generally, there's no obstacles except for wave trains. And if you point your boat, you can get out of most of the class, 2-3 stuff. I mean, the only issue here is it's kind of like Lake Ontario waves, but it's nothing like over the top. And you can kind of see wave trains in the distance, but you could point your boat and, generally miss most of it, if not all of it. You just got to, point your boat, and there's a lot of current, so you just got to start your motion early. And as long as you're paddling and keeping the boat square on the waves, there should be no issue.
We're going right.
So we're just trying to, you know, kiss the right side of the wave trains here.
Yeah, we will.
And every so often you end up running into something, so you just square the boat up to it and take it, you know, head on properly. Squarely, we should say. And as long as you keep paddling, everything's stable. So now we go back to the right to try to, you know, get around this stuff. And you can see we're missing most of the stuff in the middle there.
Got it. Got it.
And you can see there's swirlies here, so we probably should have been a little more to the left. You know, a little more in the flow, but yeah, it all worked out.
Back to the left a bit, center.
Yeah, so now we're going a little left now to get into the flow.
That's not too bad.
Because there's a huge eddy on the side going back upriver. So you don't want to get caught there, you'll get spun.
Keep us in the flow. That's it.
So I would say that was the biggest waves really on the Fourth Canyon. Maybe here's a couple more, but. And the water was generally high
Head to the right.
from what we heard. And like I said, there's absolutely no obstacles. There's no rocks that we can see. They're all underwater somewhere.
Yeah, right a little bit.
The canyons are these big notches. Beautiful canyons. They're up like 3,000 vertical feet, I think, sometimes. Okay, there was a big wave. And there's probably a rock to the left there, just buried a bit.
Go square through it.
Yeah, so this is, you know, big waves, but again, you just keep it square. And you just keep paddling, so you got like your outriggers for stability. The guides did tell us, and I read this somewhere else, that, you know, if you're tentative about this thing, you can always lash the boats together and take them as a raft.
Okay, let's
So you
get
can
to
put like two boats together and have more of a raft kind of idea. And as long as you got a deck cover, you're not going to take on too much water.
square up.
So there, I can see there's a rock over to the right or to the left here, right there. But we probably should have been a little more right, but anyways, survived it. And that was the end of the Fourth Canyon. So we had maybe 45 minutes or so of.
Just went by a canoe on the Fourth Canyon, red canoe, white writing, and Jason's just calling it in.
Okay, so we saw a canoe up on the shore, which we could not stop. We were going like 10K an hour. And it was pulled up on shore with nobody in it. And the shores were pretty high. Then we found a second canoe.
Oh, another Jack Pine.
Like, and it's the same outfitter, Jack Pine. And it's a brand new canoe.
That's brand new.
Wow.
Like, you can't even see a scratch on the thing, almost.
Great
And a brand new spray deck that was made in July or something,
spray deck on, but no.
or April or March or something like this. It was like brand new, and the tag on the front said something like, oh, there's the tag. I don't know if I read it, but it was just a few months old. So you got $3,000 a boat and $1,000 a spray deck just sitting there. And the only way they can get it out is helicopter. Camp 11. There's these flowers that look like cotton balls. It's pretty.
I want to stay on this side of it.
There we go.
So this is called Wrigley's Whirlpool, and watch what happens. So you got a creek coming in from the left. Our main creek, our main flow is coming in this way. So it's like the flow is going every which way.
Climbing a mountain.
And because we're in this boil, we're trying to climb up like an inch or two. So we're going up this mountain of water right now. And we're just getting to the top of it. And the back end is going this way, that way, this way.
We're not through it yet.
So I'm in the bow and Yuri's starting and he's having a hell of a good time, I guess.
Gary?
Oh, so See these guys in the back? They got stuck in that whirlpool, so they're going around a couple times. Yeah, oh, they're out now, but they were going around a few times. But nothing dangerous. It's just, you know,
On the flat
spins you
river.
around.
And Direction Mountain. There's a white blade paddle.
Somebody started the Nahanni name and we finished it with a canoe there.
Oh, that's pretty
And
good.
Rebecca had a brilliant idea. Okay, let's use wood for paddles. So that is more representative of Nahanni.
Maybe while we're waiting, Gary, I'll just give a few more details at Virginia Falls.
Yeah.
Everybody, you probably saw the boardwalks just because of the high volume of traffic, relatively high volume of traffic. So the Parks Canada have those boardwalks that they ask you to stay on. All the tent sites are on platforms, wood platforms. Gary went up Sunblood Mountain that day. Sunblood's on the opposite side of the campsite. So you just paddle across, and it's pretty well a full day hike to get up there. Some of us went to the other side of the falls and walked, did the hike sort of on river left, if you will. You're much closer down. You're down more at, I'll say, water level compared to the campsite side where you're up much higher. And then people probably notice that big rock outcrop in the middle of the falls. And that's called Mason Rock, named after Bill Mason, of course. And what else? I guess the portage, at the bottom of the portage where you come out at the base of Virginia Falls, you're probably half a kilometer from the falls itself. It's quite a distance downstream. It's a rocky shoreline. You can walk back up if you have the time and everything.
Question for you, Brian, while we're waiting, your trip that you did previously, was it a self-guided trip or was it another trip with guides?
No, it was self-guided. It was through the WCA. There was actually 5 of us, and we started and finished out of Fort Simpson, and we used South Nahanni Airways to get in and out. And so we had 2 canoes, or 2 tandems, and 1 solo boat.
Okay.
And like I say, we were actually on that trip, we only left Rabbit Kettle in mid-August, and the parks people told us, I remember, we were the 3rd last group on the river. And we only saw one other individual. He was a German guy by himself.
Yeah, lots of Germans.
And we caught up to him, and he had, for all his food and everything, he had like a 20-pound bag of flour and about a 50-pound bag of rice. And his plan was to go all the way down, and he was going to try to paddle downstream, down the Mackenzie as far as he could before weather would force him off the river type of thing. And it was, I still remember that we thought, wow, this guy is hardcore. Doing this at that time of year, especially by himself with, next to no supplies.
So a typical lunch, they whip the table out and they got their lunch menu. So this happened to be wraps with a bunch of fresh vegetables and cheese and all kind of spready stuff. Typical gravel bar, little creek coming in. So a lot of times they would know something interesting that would be up this creek. So we'd go for little hikes, and they're just, half an hour hikes, whatever. So some people would sit on the beach and rest. Other people would go for the little hike and explore. I didn't do this, but some of the guides did.
Headland. Oh, there he's going on full throttle.
So typically we'd come on across these little waterfalls like this. Water's like, you know, a couple degrees above freezing.
My God.
A good way to freeze your brain. The dry suit, you know, we didn't get wet, but except for our head. So it was bearable. But the days were nice, you know, they were pleasant, like 20 Celsius. Not too hot, not too cold. I think at this campsite, they told us about the paddle cabin, and Jim found a piece of wood, and you know, we started whittling away at our paddle for this paddle cabin that's coming up in 2 or 3 days. And while we were doing that, 2 moose came by. So this is the first moose that floated by, and he decided to exit the river. So he came in from the left and just floated right by our camp within like 5 meters. And then he exited, and his buddy is about to enter the river and basically do the same thing, except the buddy had a change of mind, like as she was traveling through, or he was traveling through, I don't know. So here comes the partner moose on the same beeline, he was coming from the right shore across at that point, and he's almost across the whole river right now. But then he realizes, hey, there's people here. So at some point he decides to change course. So you could see he's like within a few, you know, a canoe length of the shoreline, and the other guy was even closer. Like I would say 3/4 of a canoe. So now he saw us and he's powering to get back across the river again. All right, back on the river. So we were rafting here, and you're traveling about close to 10K an hour. You don't realize it, but you're motoring along. I think somebody had their GPS out and confirmed it was about 10K an hour. And you can see the river's quite wide at this point.
All right. Right at the basin, Pulpit Rock. Just over there, I guess.
So this is called the gate.
Couple ptarmigans on the trail.
So we were hiking up to this Pulpit Rock, which is at the gate, where it's like an S turn in the river. These ptarmigans, there's like 10 ptarmigans in here, and they're so well camouflaged, it's really hard to see them. Yeah, so there's one walking, but if they don't move, you can't even see them. And they could be like a couple meters in front of you. So we're hiking up Pulpit Rock, and it's all these cube kind of rocks. It's about, I think 400 vertical meters, probably 350, 400 meters. And you're going up these kind of chimneys, but it's all, you know, stepping up a foot or two kind of thing. Somebody's breathing.
Look at the crack above there. Moving on, hopefully holding on. We hope.
So we're getting to the top of Pulpit Rock, a little bit further.
Where's the top?
Okay, now we're on more or less the top, and we're looking down. It's like, I don't know, 300-400 meter vertical downwards to the river. And it's, you know, pure vertical. I mean, you get an idea from the other side. That's what it looks like down there. So the river does this huge S-turn, but you know, no big rapids or anything, just it's a flowing through. And strawberries, a little bit early, but there was a few there and I chewed on them. I'm back on the river. Many of us have been flipping partners. So I'm back with Yuri here, but I've been with my daughter Rebecca, Fiona, and a few others in flipping positions. This is Camp 13. Another one of these cotton ball kind of flowers. Every camp's a little bit different, which is neat to have the variety. The next morning, this is called the Cliffs. And on one of the maps we had, that somebody went before us, I guess, they were talking about falling rocks. So you have to watch in this area. There's another waterfall. It's called the bookcase or the library because all the rocks are kind of layered like books.
Just went through the Big Bend. Is that what it's called? The Big Bend.
Big Bend is like a 180-degree turn in the river. But again, this is the rapids. They're not, you know, anything more serious than this. Just the water's flowing, but it's just like a moving lake, basically.
Nice blue sky with some clear clouds.
And you can see the valleys. These valleys supposedly were not touched by glaciers. That's their claim to fame. So this creek called Painted something Creek had this bacteria on some of the rocks that made the rocks red. And you would see patches of these red rocks as you went up. We also saw an ice field, I think it was on the Broken Skull, that had like red bacteria on top of the ice. So you can see the rocks are quite pinkish looking. And that's that bacteria. So we hiked up this creek maybe 2-3K, you know, maybe 45 minutes or so. Camp 14, so you notice how cloudy it is? That's smoke from BC. You can't really smell it, but all of a sudden it just rolled in and we didn't really know what was going on. It might have been a fire close, but we found out later from the rangers So the ranger station is where the helicopter is going to land. And there was I don't know, 2 or 3 in and out of helicopters today. So he's going into the woods, but basically it's a clearing and there's a ranger station there. So the next day we paddled back up the river and back to the ranger station. You can see there's a boat there. So this boat has traveled, I don't know, maybe 100K from Nahanni Butte to get to this point. It's about 100K to go probably.
Tent City.
So all these tents here are
Naughty Pine.
people that are working on, you know, science stuff, biology stuff. And they're camped out and they're studying the something frog, or they're studying the something.
Fish.
This is the paddle shack, the original paddle shack where people put their paddles up. So we actually hung our paddle here. There's our paddle. And we had some WCA people come in about 2 weeks after us. And actually, because the paddle was right at the doorway, they ran right into our paddle and said, "We saw your paddle." And we know those people. So, and that was Eric, who was on the call last week. So this is the paddle we whittled about, well, we started 3 days before and finished, you know, the day before. I mean, everybody had a little whittle of it, so it was pretty good. We were looking for Pierre Elliott Trudeau's signature here, but we didn't see it. So we were just looking at the doorways, the door jambs, the paddles, the window frames to see if we recognize any names, but I didn't see anybody I recognized. But there are people from Switzerland and Germany and, you know, Canada, of course, US, all over the world, basically. And there's all sorts of paddles, you know, some that are quite elegant and some that are quite rough, small ones and big ones. This is one of the helicopters that came in. Dead Men Valley check-in. So this is a ranger station.
We're entering the first canyon.
Okay, so it starts off 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. So this is like the last canyon. And the canyons are like roughly 10, 15K long generally. The 4th one is the most rapids. The 3rd one is a little smaller. The 2nd one's a little smaller, and this one is even smaller.
I don't know.
So now we're imagining we're seeing sheep or something. Every little white dot in the distance is a sheep. And as we get closer, we realize it's a rock or whatever. Oh, this thing is, there's an arc up there in the rock. It's hard to see with the camera, but it's big arc. It's like 2 or 3 canoes you can put in it. And these mountains are about 3,000 vertical feet above us. Camp 15, Lafferty Creek. So another hike. We camped and we went up this creek. And it's kind of like one of these water cut creeks through the mountain. It kind of reminds me of like when you go to Sedona, where you got the sandstone, it's all molded. It's very similar, except this is harder probably. And the water is cold. It's like, you know, probably 5, 6, 7 degrees, something like that. A little warmer than the river, but still cold. So we're kind of walking our way up deep sections and pulling ourselves up. And there's these little pools. And maybe it's 10 degrees Celsius, something like that. You know, you could swim for a few minutes and then you say you did it and move on to the next one.
Yes. Have a good day. Any coffee? Oh, sorry.
There's quite an echo here.
Well, you're not gonna put more in your neck, so don't worry about it.
Brian, you missed all this good fun.
Yes.
No, it's not like river cold. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, it was doable. It was like probably 10 Celsius, something like that, where the river is like 4 or something.
something to my chest. It's not too bad, no? The water's okay. This reminds me of the Lost Caves or something. Where it's blue water.
Yeah, so now you've got to swim here. It's like 6 foot deep. But it goes up and down, right? So it's 6 foot and then it's down to 3 and then it's down to 1 and then you're back on land again. If you go high enough, you get to like a little pond system, I think.
We're swimming upstream like salmon.
Full salmon.
Well, there's not much flow, so it's not bad.
Yeah, you can see it's quite a deep canyon.
It's a new sport. I should have brought my my head unit to clamp it to my forehead.
Yeah, so I'm holding the camera while swimming. I didn't have
I see the blue lagoon.
normally I have a helmet on with a camera on it. All right, some more waterfall stuff.
That was a big wave.
This is Lafferty's Riffle. So again, the river's wide. You can avoid stuff if you don't want to go into it. But Fiona and Rebecca, they want to go into everything. So
That's fine.
but you can see the boat gets squirrely because it's going this way and that way and every which way.
That's a big one.
But there's not really any consequences. I mean, this riffle ends in a couple of 100 meters and you just be floating in the river if there was an upset. I hear an airplane going over.
Wasn't so bad. Great job, Fiona. Martha. That was a good job. Yeah, you went. But it was controllable. Good job.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. This is the part I like. This was a couple that had a cabin, and the cabin's still there. Krause's. And they stayed, I don't know, 10, 20 years in this area where there's a hot spring. So what you do, you dig out the river bed here, and the hot spring is just coming off the side of the river here. So you kind of make your pool. And, you know, many people have dug out rocks and made about a 2 foot deep pool here. So we had little snackies as they floated around, and we sat in the hot tub or hot spring. That was nice. This is their actual, there was 2 cabins. This is like almost like a tool shed kind of cabin. The other cabin was maybe about double the size, maybe triple. Yeah, probably triple the size. This one was quite small. So this is another paddle cabin, but it's not the original paddle cabin.
Paddle shack. Oh, very small cabin.
And you could see there's a lot of paddles on the floor where people hung them up, and over time the string, you know, broke and deteriorated. But it's a neat thing when you go in there. I mean, you're going back 50 years sometimes, some of these dates. And you could hear the paddles, and people keep hanging them up with new strings and stuff, but I guess the park staff or something, but There's quite a few on the floor. It's a very small building too. It's only maybe 10 by 8, something like that. It's not very big. It's just called the Twisted Mountain. Okay. So we're getting to about 2 days from the end of the trip.
Probably Nahanni Butte is that big lump over
Yeah.
there.
So we're about a day from the end, I guess. Nahanni Butte is a town, and that mountain is right in front of it. So in this area, they put bison, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, and they're really thriving right now. So this herd we saw was about 20, 25 bison. And I think just before this, maybe an hour before, we saw another herd of about 10, 15. So they're doing quite well in this area. And there was like babies in there laying on the ground, like, I don't know, size of a, I don't know, St. Bernard kind of thing. But, and then the full bison are, you can see there's, I don't know, 15 or so. It's hard to make out because they're brown on brown, but they're a full size bison there. A bunch of them. When you actually get the Nahanni Butte, you can actually see the cow patties.
Oh, that's not great.
No, that's not that bad.
Okay, so this is the last camp before the last day, and there's mega bugs.
Yeah, this one's look. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
We're counting bugs.
The bugs really like the neoprene.
Yeah.
Like just that's like 27. Boom. Oh, 29. 32. 47.
Yeah, I don't want to flop it.
Yeah, they like anything black for sure. If you look at people closely, anything bright, there's not many bugs on them. So this is the final day. It took us a few hours to paddle, not too far from our camp. And this is a native village. There's maybe 100 people population. So now what we got to do is we got to shuttle by boat, and we're going to go down the Nahanni a couple, maybe a K or two, and then up the Liard River about maybe 10K. And again, Liard River is 10K an hour flow, so you can't paddle up it. So it took about 45 minutes to an hour. And now we're going up Liard, and we get to this kind of landing there where Nahanni River Adventures had a shuttle service. So on the way back, remember I was talking about bison. There are bison everywhere. In town, you can see the patties, but there's random bison on the road here.
They ever
warn you? We don't really want to test whether or not they're going to do that. They have not shown aggression yet, but you want to be respectful and safe all at the same time. Maybe a little heat.
This doesn't happen on the Don Valley.
It was probably trying to get away from the bugs as well.
Ears are up.
Yeah.
Something's happening.
Somebody said in the van, this doesn't happen on the Don Valley Parkway. So we saw quite a few bison driving, moose, stuff like that. So we get to Fort Simpson, and we stayed at the Bannock Inn, which is within a couple 100 meters of Nahanni River Adventure headquarters in this area. These are just a couple stills. It's a very nice building, native run. You basically go in, it's about $200 a night, and you just help yourself to the fridge and whatever's there, basically. So, so that's basically the YouTube video. So let me stop sharing and get back to, oops, that didn't work. Did I do that right? Okay, stop sharing. There we go. There we go. We're back. Okay. All right. So my plan now is I've got a short PowerPoint presentation, And I'll just go through, and if somebody's got a question, you could just, unmute yourself and ask it. So let me bring this up. Okay, so presentation. Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, there we go. Again, I'm fighting with my screens here. Okay, so that's gonna go hopefully on. Very good. Okay, that's working. We have contact and share screen 2. All right, now I gotta pull all you people back this way. Keep flipping screens on me. Okay, bring this over. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so this is your classic picture of the falls. We're in the valley there. And let's see if I can get it in there now. There we go. And that's the classic picture of the people on the trip. So I just kind of go through the names here. My daughter, one of the guides, Fiona, Yuri, Michael, 2 guys, Jason, Olivier, Jim, myself, Doug, Jean-Claude, Neil, Larry, I mentioned that, and Brian, of course. And then we have the Broken Skull paddle with all our names on it, somewhere in the paddle shack right now. This is the kind of trip diary and location. As you remember last week at the Broken Skull, the first 6 camps are on that YouTube video now. So I posted this, so it will be on the YouTube video. So after the fact, you can always stop the video and kind of look at it and say, oh yeah, that's the coordinate. I put it in Google and find out where exactly these places are. Basically, it's the confluence, Cirque des Unclimbables. Bunny Bar is a way to fly into. Rabbit Kettle, you remember the lake. It's another point you can fly into. It gives you an idea here, the distance. And this distance started at the top of Broken Skull. So we're starting at 110 and we're going to end up at 4 something. But it will give you an idea. There's about 30K and 4K, so it gives you an idea. Then we got to Hell Roaring Creek, and then we camped at Oxbow Lake, which is kind of a dead branch of the river. Virginia Falls. We hiked the Sunblood Mountain, Virginia Falls, the 4th Canyon. Then right after the 4th Canyon is called the Falls Canyon. Clearwater Creek, Wrigley, 3rd Canyon, the Gate, Pulpit Rock, the Cliffs, Big Bend, start of the 2nd Canyon. The Paddle Cabin, Deadman Valley Warden Cabin, Buggy Gravel Bar. I didn't like that one. 1st Canyon, Lafferty Creek Hike, Lafferty Riffle, the Hot Springs, that was good. And then the last camp was super buggy, didn't like that one at all. And then we ended up in the native village of Nahanni Butte, and then did the shuttle, boat shuttle to start with to the landing, and then a car shuttle van to Fort Simpson. And the total trip was 483 total, starting at 110 for this segment of the trip. And then the next day we flew to Yellowknife and on to Toronto. This gives you kind of the overview. The Broken Skull started back here, and this is 110, and this is the 483. And then we took a little boat travel here, about 10-15K, and then about a 3-hour drive to Fort Simpson. The next day we flew to Yellowknife, and then various people went different directions, but most people went back to Toronto. I mentioned last week, we flew in from Mayo to the headwaters. There are other options. Watson Lake has an aerodrome. You can fly from there to various points. We had the group that came after us a few weeks, flew in from Fort Nelson, sorry. And they car shuttled up to here from somewhere south and then flew in that way. Another group flew in from Fort Simpson. I've also, Eric, who flew in from Fort Nelson, said you can fly in from Norman Wells. So you could do Yellowknife, Norman Wells, and fly in. So all these places, well, except Whitehorse, but this has float planes. I believe this has for sure. Watson Lake has for sure. And I guess these guys have. So these are the key places that you can use. So you just go on the internet, you zoom into this, you'll find the airport and you click on it and you'll see who flies out of there. And you contact those people and figure out what the options are. So there's lots of options. What we did is we flew from Whitehorse, or we took a shuttle from Whitehorse to Mayo, which is a 5-hour drive. And then we had an airplane ride in maybe an hour and a half-ish to Broken Skull if you're doing the whole thing. Then Broken Skull to Nahanni. You can also fly to this thing called the Bunny Bar. So this is just past the confluence. The airplane lands on the river, or at Rabbit Kettle Lake, flies into the lake at the ranger station, or at Virginia Falls. So you basically, this would be maybe a 12-day trip. This is a 10-day trip. This is a 7-day trip, something like that. We exited Nahanni Butte, we took a water taxi and shuttle to Fort Simpson. There's also, you don't have to take the water taxi. You could go down the river another 2 days, and the Yard River gets close to the highway at this coordinate, and you could have somebody pick you up at that point. The Liard River is kind of boring. It's a big kind of muddy river. It's more muddy than the South Nahanni. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend it. And because Nahanni Butte and one day above it was buggy, this will be buggy. And the shoreline, you know, it's mud flats kind of stuff. So you can climb out and find a spot to camp, but it's not ideal. And if you paddle, I don't know, maybe another couple 100 kilometers, probably 200 kilometers, you get to Fort Simpson. You were going to say something, Brian?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Yard River takeout, there's actually Northwest Territories has Blackstone, I think, Territorial Park.
Okay.
So you could actually take out there, and then there's road access. And they actually very nice campsites, hot showers and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, this
But
takeout to the main road is maybe 5-10K. It's not that far. And it's a good little road. Yeah. What I saw on Google Maps, there's like a little village down here, maybe 20 houses or something. So it's a little like center, and I can't remember the name of it. It was a name, something landing. But if you just Google this thing, you'll see it. Here's the options if you had a guided trip. So 7 days, I mentioned, is you land in Virginia Falls and you go to 7 days down the river. It's 84. 10 days is, I think, Rabbit Kettle. It's a little bit more. And 12 days, if you did that bunny stop, bunny something, whatever it's called. So you can see the difference in, you know, days of food or whatever is nothing. It's really the flight in and out. That's where all the cost is, you know. And then Eric mentioned last week that he just did, I think he flew into Virginia Falls. He did this version. So he did this 84.75 guided trip cost for $2,100 a person. Plus he has to add his commercial flights, which is basically getting to Yellowknife or wherever. So that's usually about $1,000. And then he also rented a van. So there's, you know, a shared cost, a couple $100 each probably. So I'm thinking his trip was maybe 3,500 max. So this trip, you have to add on the 1,000 commercial flights. So you're talking 95, you know, 95, I don't know, 10,000. So you could do the trip for about a third the price if you know, guide yourself. You basically self-guide. There's a few details. You've got to pick up a permit because you're going through the parks. You've got to make sure you're at the aerodrome when your permit says you're supposed to be there. You could be at the Virginia Falls Aerodrome area for 2 days max. So generally you book the 2 days And, if there was an issue, you're late or something, at least you have an extra day. You're officially supposed to be there. I don't think anybody's going to chase you out if there was a weather issue or some other issue, but so generally, you can do, if you're self-guided, about a third the price of a guided trip. The negative is you got to do all the logistics. But generally, like a club like us, you can contact people and say, I'd like to do it. And there are people in the club that just did it or have done it a couple of years before, and they could tell you, what to do and where to go and all this kind of stuff. Sort of like what I'm doing right now. And then the version I went on was this version. It cost us $10,000, 23 days, but the food's included. And both the Broken Skull and South Nahanni. Flight services. Eric last week said he flew from, I guess, Fort Simpson, $12.98 per person to Nahanni Falls, Virginia Falls, really. I should write that. I did get a quote just the day after my last presentation where I guess this was 5,000. It worked out to be 81.89 from Mayo to divide it. So we took this flight in, and this is what it would cost Nahanni Adventures to, foot the bill for each flight that we took in. I think we took in 2 flights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2 flights, and maybe this was the bigger one. This is the Otter, and the other one was a Cessna, maybe. So maybe it was a little bit cheaper. Yeah.
I was going to say, we actually had 2 flights of us, like participants, and then 2 of the guides came in from Watson Lake. So we actually had 3 flights worth of stuff for the whole.
Yeah. So it probably cost them somewhere in the neighborhood of 24,000 just to get us in there. And out was cheaper because just shuttles and stuff like that. There's also flights I know from Fort Nelson that Eric, who did this one, talked about. Watson Lake, we saw an aerodrome there on the maps, and you mentioned Norman Wells. What else?
And Gary, just a question about that flight from Mayo. That cost 8,000 will be split 6 ways.
Yeah, this is a flight. Yeah. So if you have 6 people and 3 canoes, think about, well, plus tax, right? But say 9,500-ish divided by 6. So what's that? 1,500 each or something? 1,800, something like that. Yeah. But there's other options because that's a long flight from Mayo to divide. Maybe Fort Nelson or Watson Lake is definitely closer. So maybe this would be a better option, but you have to get to Watson Lake. So it's always a combination of, you have to, start somewhere with commercial flight, and that could be Whitehorse, Yellowknife. Then you have to get to wherever these places, right? And then you have to kind of lay out plan A, plan B, plan C. What's the cheapest route to go, generally. So it's, this one's a little complicated because there's many options. Like you said, if I go back to that map, you can go in from here, but you have to get here. So you either have to drive to Watson Lake, and this is about 12 hours, I think, or a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. And this is about 12, 14 hours, I think. So if you came in from Yellowknife and popped over here with a flight, now you have to jump to somewhere, and then back out this way. So, or you're coming in from this way, you're hitting into here, So what we did is we ended up here and then flying over to here and then down the river and then there. And then some of us had to go, I think somebody had to go back to Whitehorse. So they went Yellowknife to Whitehorse and back home. Other people went Yellowknife to, Edmonton and back home. So there's all kind of, ways to do it. And whatever makes sense to you is what it comes down to. Other little things that I think Eric mentioned. We talked about that boat shuttle. When he did the boat shuttle, so he came 2 weeks after us, it was $142 a person. And then the van worked out to be 192. So he got the same shuttle drivers we got as a guided trip through Nahanni River Adventures. So a lot of these places, they might not advertise on the website, but you just call them and say, this is what I want to do. And they're going to generally try to help you because they want to make money, basically. And so that's, money in their pocket, basically. So a lot of these places might not advertise they have a shuttle driver, but for non-guided trips, but they do. Or I think he even rented canoes from Nahanni River. Now it depends on if they have the canoes available, of course, right? So you got to plan these things in advance to make sure everything's lined up. I also looked at up north. So this is out of Yellowknife, out of Whitehorse. And the shuttle from Mayo, from Whitehorse to Mayo, this is so many kilometers. And depending on how many passengers, this is the price. So typically you'd be in the 6 passenger zone. So just to go from Whitehorse, it's a 5-hour drive, with the canoes and a trailer and all that kind of stuff, it'd be $1,700 plus tax. Just to shuttle up there. And if you're going to go back, it's another $1,700 to get back. So when you're talking about those kind of numbers, you might just rent your own van. And, even though it's sitting there for 2 weeks in Mayo, it might be cheaper to do it that way. And then, throw the 1 or 2 canoes on top of the van. So you have to kind of trade out all these, options, basically. Fort Simpson, this came from Eric. He said it was about $40 a canoe per day. And again, you're dividing by 2 people. From up north, Whitehorse, I know I could see on their website it's $59 a day or $355 weekly. So if you go for a 2-week trip, you're talking about probably $800-ish, with tax and stuff, $850 divided by 2, of course. So you're paying $400 for that 2 weeks of canoe. I think Eric said this was $290 a week. I didn't write it down there, but I think that's what he told us. And I guess that's it. Okay, so I'll open it up to questions in the house here. Stop sharing. All right, Bill, you have to unmute yourself if you got a question.
I was surprised that neither your PowerPoint nor your video made any reference to Figure 8 Rapids, also known as Hell's Gate. Is it no longer there?
Figure 8 is after Hell's Gate, I think.
No,
it's no longer there. There was a
another
shift.
name for Figure 8.
Yeah, maybe it's called Hell's Gate. I don't know, but no, it's no longer there. It's
okay.
I can't remember exactly when, but there was a change in the river, and it's basically disappeared. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Bill, when you did it in the 80s, tell us about Figure 8 Hell's Gate.
It was by far the hardest rapid on the river, just mainly because of the fact that it makes a 90-degree turn against a rock face.
Okay.
And I'll tell you about the 1980 one, because that was, all of us were, it was a self-guided trip. We were all, relatively inexperienced. Herb Pohl was essentially our leader. He paddled solo in a FEMAT, and we had talked about it. And there was a portage on the right. You could pull in above the actual bend in the rapid, and there was a beach there, and you could scout the rapid from there. And if you wanted to portage over the rock hump and down on the other side. So we'd agreed we would go into the eddy on the right and have a look and see whether or not we wanted to actually run this rapid. And so I was paddling in the bow with Glenn Spence in the stern. These are all historic names in the
Yeah.
WCA. But
Yeah.
anyway, Herb goes down and he's 300 or 400 meters ahead, and he disappears around the corner, and boom, he's gone. And so Glenn and I talked, and we said, well, that didn't look too bad. The reason they call it figure eight is that there were tremendous eddies, both above and below. Those were the two parts of the figure eight.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we said, well, okay, let's go on through. Well, we got put up against the right up against the rock face, and Glenn swears that he could still see the marks of my fingernails on the rock. But we managed to stay upright long enough that the rebound wave pushed us off, and we were fine from there on down through. And there's Herb in the eddy below, and there was a third canoe that was behind us, and they saw where we'd gone a little too far to the right, and they just came right down the tongue, and you could go on through very easily. Anyway, when we got to Herb, he said, geez, he said, that's quite a rapid. He'd got spun around in the lower eddy a couple of times. They ought to put that one on the map. And we said, you ass, that's Hell's Gate. Yeah. So anyway, that was a very sizable rapid in normal or high water levels. Yeah. When I came through there in 1989, it was a very low water year, and it was essentially just, what was all the fuss about,
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had one little wiggle. It was called Wrigley's something. I don't know. You remember that rapid where it was squirrely?
Well, there was a Wrigley's Creek, as I think you mentioned.
No, it was called Wrigley's something. I can't remember what the name of it was. It was on the video. We showed us. We're like wiggling around. We looked back and we saw Doug and somebody spinning around a couple of times.
Yeah.
Well, there were lots of opportunities to do that. Some of those boils were interesting.
Yeah. So joined us is Yuri Miller here. We teamed up quite a bit, and I don't know when you jumped in there, Yuri, but he was one of the guys on the trip. So
I don't know if you can hear me, Gary.
Yeah, you're kind of low, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in here somewhere.
That's fine. Anyways, we got Brian in the background there too. I don't know if there's anybody else from the trip, but at the end of the day, there was 11 of us, and then 9 of us from Virginia Falls on the way down. So if anybody else has any questions, I can take them, or maybe even Brian, Yuri can jump in.
Maybe just some questions about with the outfitted trip or the guided trip. What kind of equipment did they supply versus what you brought along as, I'll say, your personal equipment?
Okay. So generally, we would bring our own dry suits. They offered us wetsuits if we didn't have a dry suit. They supplied all the equipment as far as canoes, paddles, throw ropes, tents, sleeping pads if you want. I think some of the items were rented. I think sleeping pads you can rent, but the tent was part of the deal. What else do you have, Brian? I can't, well, obviously the food and all the cooking stuff.
Yeah.
Supplied all that.
Yeah, we just basically bought our own personal gear, and then people who had dry suits brought dry suits. The wetsuits were mandatory, and they were free of charge or included in the cost for safety reasons. And PFDs, everything, all the water filtration, food, everything else was supplied by them. So we just showed up with our what we called our travel bags up to Whitehorse, they provided the river bags, you know, the waterproof river bags and everything. We just transferred over our stuff, and that was it. So it was it was pretty. It was a lightweight type of trip for us.
Yeah. I would say the only negative on the gear is they bought these tents and there was some silly design on all of them where at the top apex of each doorway, there was a screen, but it wasn't sewn. So you can stick your hand up and around. And what happened was in the morning, so the first morning we woke up with about, I don't know, 40 flies in our tent. We go, what's going on here? And then the second morning we stuffed a sock in there or something. And we had maybe, 10, 15 mosquitoes in the tent. And we realized the thing's not sewn. So I ended up using Gorilla Tape on both ends of the tent, and that solved the problem. But it's like about, I don't know, a $600 tent. Everything else about the tent's great, except silly design at the top. For some reason, the screen is not sewn across the top. So you can stick your hand. It's kind of like an overlap kind of design. And I don't know why you would want that. Like, why would you want to put your hand up and over to get it out to do something? I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me, but it was a rock. What was the name of the tent?
It was Mountain Hardware was the brand, and it was Trango 3. It was a 3-person tent.
Not recommended. Yeah, it was terrible. And when I went around the other people, they all had flies in their tent, and I said, "This is the issue. If you want some Gorilla Tape, let me know." But yeah, I actually made the comment to Nahanni about that. The tent sucked. That was a poor design there. So that company makes good stuff, but for some bizarre reason, they didn't sew that for some reason. Anyways, problem solved with Gorilla Tape.
Did they have you 2 to a tent or 3 to a tent or?
Yeah, Yuri and I teamed up, but because of this COVID, a lot of people just went single. I think there was, out of the whole group, there was 3 tents that had 2 people, and every other tent had 1 person. So I think my daughter and Fiona teamed up. Doug and Larry, they were brothers. They teamed up, and Yuri and I. So, and everybody, because it was getting ridiculous. There was so many tents, and you got to haul these, tents in the canoe and stuff. So it got a little ridiculous. So they did ask, they didn't push anybody, but for, Yuri and I, you got 2 people doing the setup, so it goes a lot faster. Or one person jumps on the tent and the next day somebody else takes the tent, so it's kind of like, it cuts down on your workload at putting up a whole tent by yourself every day for 16 camps. That's a lot of setup stuff. So I always prefer to team up.
We had a small tent city wherever we went.
Yeah, but there was no issue. There was always room to put tents. I mean, you had lots of room. It was more of just hauling. Like, for us, we're minimalistic generally. We don't want to haul stuff we don't have to haul, right? Even though there's almost zero portaging. I mean, the only portage is like in the first day or something when you're going down the creek or going to Rabbit Kettle, which is 10 meters or something. It's nothing. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, we'll call it a night. And what I'll do is, this is being recorded, so I'll post it in the next few days on YouTube. So if you missed anything, came in late, you can always rewind and have a look, basically. All right. All right, I'll get Olivier G. Thank you. Very nice. All right. See ya.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Mike, for
Good show,
co-hosting.
Gary. Thanks.